Greetings, and welcome to A Year of Movies, a Planet Geek production. For this project, we are using the Ivan Walters reference book of 365 films to watch on the day they happened. Each day, we watch a movie associated with the date we are watching it on.
And as it is the 4th of June, we are going to be watching The Man Who Knew Too Much from 1956, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, and starring James Stewart. So to begin with, as I have mentioned previously, I am a fan of Alfred Hitchcock as well as James Stewart. Now, while this isn't one that I constantly keep coming back to, it is always quite a fun time when I do come back to watching this particular movie. And like I had already mentioned, not only does this movie star James Stewart, but it also stars Doris Day, Christopher Olsen, Brenda D. Banzi, Bernard Miles, and Daniel Galin. So when Dr. McKenna, played by James Stewart, is on vacation with his wife Josephine, played by Doris Day, and their son Hank, played by Christopher Olsen, are in Monaco when a chance encounter with a stranger sets their trip and their lives on a drastic different course. The stranger, killed in front of the family in the marketplace, reveals an assassination plot to the Americans. The couple's son is then abducted in order to ensure the plot is kept secret, and suddenly the mother and father have, with no help from the police, must figure out a way to get their child back. So this is, again, from Hitchcock. This is a fantastic outing of a perfect suspense, one of his suspense-filled films, where he basically takes ordinary people and getting them all caught up in the intrigue and suspense of the fantastical events that surround them. One of the great things about it is we have Jimmy Stewart as the lead. I always, every single time I see him, I'm so pleased to see that even though it is a serious role, Jimmy Stewart still brings this really weird sort of lightness to the character at points. For example, at the beginning, the movie when him and his wife are sitting down at the Moroccan restaurant where they have to sit on the low benches, Jimmy Stewart is basically almost doing like a comedic routine as he tries to adjust his legs to his very long legs to this small little area, and sitting next to him, Doris Day just seems to be enjoying witnessing the antics that are going on beside her, knowing that she's totally aware of the solution to their current situation. And also, not only the combination of Stewart with Hitchcock, but Stewart and Day are a fantastic coupling. They work so well together, and they seem like a well-oiled machine of a couple that's been together for quite a few years and understand how each other works in certain situations. It's just beautifully brought to the forefront, as well as Christopher Olsen doing a fantastic job of being the only child in a movie surrounded by very serious adult actors. So while the McKenna family is on a bus to Marrakesh, they meet with a mysterious Frenchman and then later meet up with an English couple. And this happens actually on June 4th, 1955, which is just under 3 minutes into this 2-hour movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular season, it ended up actually winning for Best Original Song. And as it is the 5th of June, we are going to be watching My Left Foot, the story of Christy Brown from 1989, directed by Jim Sheridan and starring Daniel Day-Lewis. So to begin with, I did see this movie quite early after. I'm pretty sure it was released on like home video or something like that. I can't remember where I actually watched it. It might have been some sort of class that I was taking at the time that wanted to study the acting or something like that. But again, it's been a while since I had seen this movie, and probably only this viewing would have been maybe my third, probably at the very most fourth watch of this movie in its entirety. And like I'd already mentioned, not only does this movie star Daniel Day-Lewis, but it also stars Brenda Frick, Ray McAnally, Fiona Shaw, Kristen Sheridan, Alison Whelan, and Hugh O'Connor. As life would have it, no one really expects much from Christy Brown, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, a boy with cerebral palsy born to a working-class Irish family. Though Christy is a spastic quadriplegic and essentially paralyzed. A miraculous event occurs when, at age 5, he demonstrates control of his left foot by using chalk to scrawl a word on the floor. with the help of his stilly mother, played by Belinda Fricker, and no shortage of grit and determination, Christy overcomes his handicap to become a painter, a poet, and an author. So this is one of those quintessential acting performances that marks Daniel Day-Lewis as the such seasoned and perfectionist that he is as an actor. His portrayal of Christy Brown from age 17 on is just so fantastic. You totally believe in every single little thing that he does. Also, another point out is the younger actor that plays younger Christy Brown of Hugh O'Connor does a fabulous job himself portraying the same gentleman in obviously a much younger role. Whereas when we do the jump from younger to older between actors, it seems very cohesive, the actual performance between the two. And another thing about this movie is not only is this a Daniel Day-Lewis movie, but this is as much a Brenda Fricker movie as well. She does a tour de force, being the loving, supportive mother, doing everything that she can, even with the low status that her family has. She brings it all. She's so emotional throughout this entire thing, which is the core of this story. As it turns out that at the beginning of this movie, Christy Brown is born, which happens to be on June 5th, 1932, which is about 7 minutes into this movie. However, we also celebrate his 17th birthday, which is at almost 29 minutes into this 1 hour and 43-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular season, it ended up winning for Best Actor for Daniel Day-Lewis and Best Supporting Actress for Brenda Fricker. It also got nominations for Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Adapted Screenplay. And as it is June 6th, we are going to be watching The Longest Day from 1962. Directed by Ken Anakin, Andrew Martin, and Bernard Wicki, and starring John Wayne. Again, like a couple of the other movies that are already on this list, this is one of those movies that is one that stands out as, hey, this is a great example of this type of movie. This is a great ensemble. This is a great war. This is a great extended length movie. And I think it's that latter part that actually kept me away from watching. This movie does almost crest the 3-hour mark, and my familiarity with watching war movies really isn't high on my priority list. However, when it came around to this list, this would definitely be the first time for me watching this movie. And like I had already mentioned, not only does this movie star John Wayne, but it also stars Henry Fonda, Robert Mitchum, Kurt Jurgens, Eddie Albert, and Fabian. Now, as a note to everyone watching this, yes, the actual full list of actors involved with this movie is numerous, and it spans several different continents as well. This movie itself dealing with basically 4 fronts in the issues that arise from this particular movie. We have a lot of German natural actors, we have a lot of French natural actors, we have a bunch of English actors as well as American actors, and the list from each of those pockets is very numerous and very notable for a lot that I didn't mention in this very short opening of list. So generally speaking, like I had mentioned, we deal with the occurrence happening on all 4 basically fronts technically, as the Allies are preparing for their major offensive in Normandy, intended on finally ridding Europe of the Nazi scourge. Every headquarters is in a frenzy. General Eisenhower hesitates over the set date to bad weather. Like so many movies on this list that are based on true events, of course, war is going to be a very central core. If we're not doing a biography about a particular artist, we're definitely going to be dealing with a war. Now, obviously, there have been other movies but a good majority of the movies that I've been watching have been centered around war because a lot of them do take place at a set time in our history. This movie is probably so far, one of the most fantastical movies that I've watched. Now, it's not spectacular in the fact that it's like state-of-the-art special effects or filmmaking techniques or whatever. It is a who's list that is like an arm length of who is acting in it. And we're dealing in like 62, so we're dealing with a lot of young versions of those that we know, and those that we already know of are a strong presence in them. And I'm talking like your Henry Fonda and your John Wayne and your Robert Mitchum and so forth. Now, because of the epic scope of the movie, like I said, almost 3-hour movie, we don't get a lot from almost anyone. Now, throughout the movie, we periodically are introduced to actual characters that are monumental in the storytelling, and they are marked with an actual title card of who this person is and where they belong in this story. And when I mention timing, out of this whole entire length of movie, the longest on-screen presence is John Wayne, and I believe roughly 18 to 20 minutes is like the maximum he is on screen. Henry Fonda is in like 2 scenes. We have a single scene with Sean Connery in it, and like 2 tiny little vignettes with Roddy McDowall, but even like Fabian shows up for a sequence, and Red Buttons of all notable faces as well shows up in this. But again, the idea of giving the audience a perspective from the different angles. The first 10 minutes is not in English. We deal with Germans and the French resistance as we approach the day that this is about to occur, that the offensive is about to occur. And then we deal with how the Americans deal with being in England in the rain and the cold and all that. And then the English going, well, let's hope this is... again, we're dealing with the Americans are like new to this war. But everyone just does a spectacular job. And again, the non-English portions are so beautifully done because, again, we're dealing with those native to the tongue acting in these roles, which gives an authentic feel to them, especially when we're dealing with the French resistance, which unfortunately we don't get a lot of. Again, we have 4 factions to deal with and 3 hours, so we have to narrow it down, but a lot of what they do plays out beautifully. And again, when you have actual actors speaking their native tongue, it adds more to the reality of what you're watching. And as the movie plays out, we are dealing with the conflict that happened at Normandy, which is basically June 6th, 1944, which is about 50 minutes into this 2-hour and 58-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that season, it ended up winning for Best Cinematography and Best Special Effects, and it actually get nominations for Best Art Direction, Best Editing, and Best Picture. And as it is the 7th of June, we will be watching Forrest Gump from 1994, directed by Robert Zemeckis and starring Tom Hanks. So to begin with, I definitely am aware of the existence of this movie for sure. It's kind of hard not to, especially at the time that the movie was coming out and all the excitement that went around to not only the actual movie itself, but the actual production of the movie itself. I did see it within, I'm pretty sure, the opening weekend of the movie and have seen it several times. However, it's always been on home video or whatever digital streaming service that I had seen the movie on, but it also has been only about a couple of months since seeing this, as one day flipping through commercial television, finding the movie and just sitting down and watching it for like about 45-50 minutes before I realized, oh, wait a sec, I've already seen this movie and I don't need to see it with commercials. But that being said, like I'd already mentioned, not only does this movie star Tom Hanks, but it also stars Michael Connors Humphrey, Robin Wright, Hannah R. Hall, Gary Sinise, McKelty Williamson, and Sally Field. Slow-witted Forrest Gump, played by Tom Hanks, has never thought of himself as disadvantaged, and thanks to his supportive mother, played by Sally Field, he leads anything but a restricted life. Whether dominating on the gridiron as a college football star, fighting in Vietnam, or captaining a shrimp boat, Forrest inspires people with his childlike optimism. but one person Forrest cares about most may be the most difficult to save: his childhood love and sweet but troubled Jenny, played by Robin Wright. So a little while ago, I had talked about seeing the movie The FBI Story with James Stewart, and I had compared the storytelling elements of that movie to this as my reference of the order in which I've seen this movie. Now, obviously, this seems to have borrowed from that idea, but what it is, we have our main character interacting with a lot of historical moments, which gets slightly altered for the reality of this movie, but it's very well done and put into a very believable special effects wizardry, which is one of the most fascinating things about this movie. Not only are we dealing with Robert Zemeckis, who definitely knows how to film this type of thing. He is very attuned with being able to know how to positively shoot a special effects sequence where we're going to replace someone's head, or it's going to be shot from a different angle, or we're just going to somehow slide Tom Hanks into the background of the shot, or we're going to actually take existing footage of a political person and actually manipulate their face to actually say what is in the script. It's just a fascinating thing. Now, of course, Tom Hanks is a phenomenal actor, one of my favorites of all time, from way back when I originally saw him in Bosom Buddies and his appearances on Family Ties and whatnot. But I've always really enjoyed all of his films, and this one is a perfect example of how amazing of an actor that Tom Hanks really is. He goes to a level that is really unlike anything you've seen him do before. They also surround him with a fantastic supporting cast. Not only to have Sally Field as his mother, who is only a couple of years difference between her and Tom Hanks at the time of the filming of this movie, but that's neither here nor there. Robin Wright does a wonderful femme fatale role with this troubled Jenny that weaves in and out of Forrest's life in bits and spurts and throughout. Gary Sinise does a fabulous job, and something that inspires his life from this point on, which is fantastic, with his future work with veterans and whatnot. The special effects that are so mind-boggling that actually are involved with the Lieutenant Dan character after his experience in Vietnam, where he loses his leg, and the special effects they use to really actually convincingly remove Gary Sinise's legs from the equation, and it's just a mind-bending. The movie is entertaining, it's very heartfelt, it's very sad at points, which is exactly what it needs to be. It is a vision to watch. Now, there is no reason to see it multiple times. I just feel that I enjoy the experience of the look of this film, the effects brought into this film, but the acting is just something that is always like, right, I keep forgetting how good everyone is in this movie every single time I see it. Now, of course, one of the tragic points of this story is that Forrest's buddy, Bubba, ends up losing his life in a conflict during Vietnam, which happens actually at 48 minutes roughly into this 2-hour and 22-minute movie. And one of the tragic things about this particular movie is that during the conflict in Vietnam, Forrest's buddy Bubba unfortunately dies during the conflict in the jungle one of the sad things is, during an ambush in Vietnam, Forrest's buddy Bubba unfortunately tragically dies, which is on June 7th, 1967, which happens about 48-ish minutes into this 2-hour and 22-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular season, it actually ended up winning for Best Picture, Best Actor for Tom Hanks, Best Director, Best Film Editing, Best Visual Effects, and Best Adapted Screenplay. It also ended up getting nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Gary Sinise, Best Art Direction, Best Makeup, Best Cinematography, Best Original Score, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Sound Editing. And as it is the 8th of June, we are going to be watching Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief, from 2010.
directed by Chris Columbus and starring Logan Lerman. Now, whereas I was vaguely familiar with the novel series that this movie is based on, I did happen to get to see this opening weekend. The people I was around at the time were very excited to see this movie, so I went along not knowing much of what I was going to see other than the fact that it was going to be the gods dealing with humanity and all that sort of thing. That being said, I don't think I maybe have seen it maybe once, maybe twice, just maybe actually in passing while someone else was watching the movie. But since my original theatrical watch, I believe this is the first time that I've actually watched the entire movie in one sitting. And like I'd already mentioned, not only does this movie star Logan Lerman, but it also stars Brandon T. Jackson, Alexandria Daddario, Jacob Bell, Sean Bean, Kevin McKidd, Steve Coogan, and Melina Caracandas. Always trouble-prone, the life of Percy Jackson, played by Logan Lerman, it's a little more complicated when he learns that he's the son of the Greek god Poseidon, played by Kevin McKidd. At a training ground for children of deities, Percy learns to harness his divine powers and prepare for an adventure of a lifetime. He must prevent a feud among the Olympians from erupting into a devastating war on Earth, and rescue his mother, played by Catherine Keener, from the clutches of Hades, played by Steve Coogan, the god of the underworld. So this first movie is a great start to what the idea was, to create basically another Harry Potter series, but set to a different set of books. Now, obviously, we're dealing with Greek gods instead of wizards and magic and all that sort of thing, but they have the actual proper person in charge of this movie. The gentleman who also directed the very first two Harry Potter movies, Chris Columbus, also directs this. He definitely has a known way of directing a younger cast as well as directing for special effects. A lot of the stuff seems very, very seamless and very well done. When I'm talking like the lining up with the eyes and all that sort of thing, everything seems to work out pretty well. It's very cohesive that way. Now, of course, the special effects sometimes hinders a little from the date that the movie is made, but still it looks very well polished. And unfortunately, the movie, while it did find an audience, subsequent versions of this didn't survive as well in the box office. And then we now have a Disney Plus series that is in its second season that follows further adventures of Percy Jackson with a whole different cast. So it's basically one of the better sort of action movies that are centered around a teen cast, which this cast does a fantastic job. The trio that we have as the core of this movie work very well together in the, and we have a very great supporting cast surrounding them, which is kind of cool. And again, some of the special effects are like really spectacular, especially when we're dealing with like centaurs and whatnot. Half people, half digital characters are the ones that work out the best in this. So as the story starts, we have Zeus, played by Sean Bean, warns Poseidon that unless Poseidon's demigod son Percy Jackson returns his thunderbolt, that war will break out. And it is the following day, which is June 8th, 2010, when we encounter Percy during his school time experiences, where he actually starts off holding his breath underwater for 7 minutes. The introduction of the character being about almost 5 minutes into this 1 hour and 58-minute movie.
And as it is the 9th of June, we are going to be watching Saving Private Ryan from 1998, directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Tom Hanks. So again, we're dealing with a time in history of Hollywood of when this particular movie was going into production. The names behind it alone caused a big stir of excitement towards it. When the actual premiere comes out and whatnot was a fantastic, and it was received well by so many people. However, to be completely 100% honest, while I have seen this movie prior to this project, I have not seen it actually in its full start to finish format. I believe the first time that I had watched the movie, it was a rental that we started way too late, and I think I crashed because we started the movie at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was out by like 2:30. Now again, going back the next day, where was I? And here's where I vaguely remember my last thing. And every once in a while I would sit down and look, Saving Private Ryan's on and start watching that for a bit, and then realize I don't have the time to devote to a 3-hour movie. I'll just watch this particular sequence and all that. But yeah, so while I have seen the movie before, this is the first time I've actually watched it from beginning to end in one sitting. And as I had just mentioned, not only does the movie star Tom Hanks, but it also stars Matt Damon, Tom Sizemore, Edward Burns, Vin Diesel, Ted Danson, and a lot more people. So Captain John Miller, played by Tom Hanks, takes his men behind enemy lines to find Private James Ryan, who is Matt Damon. Those whose 3 brothers have also been killed in combat. Surrounded by the brutal realities of war, while searching for Ryan, each man embarks upon a personal journey and discovery of their own strengths to triumph over an uncertain future with honor, decency, and courage. Now, it goes without saying that this is probably one of the most spectacularly realistic depictions of war at the time. Actually, to tell you the truth, since then as well. The opening sequence is just a harrowing example of how brutal war can be. And according to those that reported about it, the veterans who actually were at the time at D-Day on Omaha Beach, back that what they witnessed on the screen from what Spielberg was able to put up there was probably the most realistic version of what they had encountered. And that goes without saying, we're dealing with a Spielberg movie. The man knows how to shoot big, bombastic, not only action sequences, but get fantastic drama out of every one of his actors. And he does. And the fact that he's dealing with such a ensemble cast, every couple of minutes, we're introducing familiar faces, whether they're known or not known. They're all like, that guy is in this movie as well. It's just a smorgasbord of fantastic acting and actors that contribute to the reality of this movie. And even just the men under Tom Hanks' command are a fantastic set of actors. We're dealing with Barry Pepper, Jeremy Davies, Adam Goldberg, Giovanni Ribisi. We even have quick little cameos from Bryan Cranston and Paul Giamatti. Even the first Private Ryan that they run across that turns out to be the wrong one is actually played by Nathan Fillion. It is a bit of a watch, but you don't really feel it as you are so absorbed into this mission, this poor woman who is about to be told that 3 of her sons are about to have died during this conflict, and that at the last second they're like, okay, we got to make sure we get this final son to safety. And that's where they they actually make Tom Hanks and his crew search out, and unfortunately they come over stumbling blocks. They're still in the middle of the war, so they have to also deal with that as well. Misinformation and just the consuming enemy coming at them from almost every angle. And like I said, when it is learned that 3 of the 4 sons that are taking part in this war have died, the state's general manager decides to order Miller to find the final Ryan boy, and his word comes down on June 9th, 1944, which is about 36 minutes into this 2 hours and 49-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular season, it actually ended up winning for Best Director, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, Best Sound Editing, and Best Sound, and also got nominations for Best Actor for Tom Hanks, Best Original Screenplay, Best Art Direction, Best Makeup, and Best Original Score. And as it is the 10th of June, we are watching Invictus from 2009, directed by Clint Eastwood and starring Morgan Freeman. So it's kind of hard to avoid the deal of not only Morgan Freeman portraying Nelson Mandela in a film, but a movie that is also directed by Clint Eastwood is definitely high on everyone's radar when a movie like this is being produced. Now, that being said, I did not see any sort of really need to watch this movie until it came around to the viewing for this project. So this is the first time I've seen the movie. And before I go into mention the different cast members that are in the opening that I do for every episode, I want to apologize for messing up any names because I am a heathen and do not know how to properly pronounce sometimes words and names. But like I had mentioned, this movie does star Morgan Freeman, but it also stars Matt Damon, Njoa Endo, Tony Courage, Julian Lewis-Jones, Patrick Bafoking, and Matt Stern. After his 27-year imprisonment and subsequent election as president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela faces the task of unifying a country divided by race. Only months since the end of apartheid, division still exists between the country's whites and blacks. Something that Mandela, played by Morgan Freeman, notices during an international rugby match, realizing black supporters cheer on the opposing side when their white Springboks take to the field. So everything being said, this is unsurprisingly a very well done movie. When we're dealing with a seasoned actor and director as Clint Eastwood dealing with such strong performers as Morgan Freeman and Matt Damon, we definitely have a very strong movie, just acting-wise. The surrounding cast are fantastic for their roles, and we get to see the true ideals of a people trying to come into the change of their society as Nelson Mandela takes his position as president in this situation, and how he himself deals with those issues as well. So that being said, it's a fantastically acted movie. Eastwood does a really great job of being able to pull out great performances, dramatic performances from actors, but he does some really surprisingly action-oriented stuff when we get into the field onto these rugby games, which is actually quite surprising to see. Now, of course, Eastwood himself, in his movies, he's known for doing a lot of action stuff and all that, but to see him to be able to replicate a very sort of the intensity of being in the middle of the scrimmage of a rugby game is a very fascinating thing to witness. It just turns out to be a very an uplifting movie that basically gives you the idea that everyone who wants to be better than they actually are, and they figure out a way to do that. Mind you, while I know of the area where it's supposed to be centered, it is kind of weird to see Matt Damon putting on a South African accent. It doesn't take long to get used to it, but it's kind of weird when he first speaks to see this accent coming out of his mouth. But again, very convincing, and of course, surrounded by other fantastic actors doing a great job. So as the Springboks, the rugby team that Matt Damon is the captain of, goes throughout having different games and all that, they end up having one on June 10th, 1995, where they beat Western Samoa. And that happens at 1 hour and 22 minutes into this 2 hour and 14-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards that season, it got nominated for Best Actor for Morgan Freeman, Best Supporting Actor for Matt Damon. And on that note, we're going to wrap up here and look off into the future to see what we're going to be watching for tomorrow, which is going to be the 11th of June, and that is going to be The Whole Wide World from 1996. So until next time, go see a movie.
This has been A Year of Movies, a Planet Geek production. Please be sure to subscribe, download, comment, share, rate, and review. Once again, another thanks to Ivan Walters for his book, A Year of Movies, 365 films to watch on the day they happened. Look for it online or at your local bookstore. Follow Planet Geek Productions on all of our social media. Through Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, and Letterboxd, search for Planet Geek Productions. On X, former Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky, search for Planet Geek Pod. You can also reach out to us through email at planetgeekpod@gmail.com. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, go see a movie.